The album is called Collapsed In Sunbeams, and I got that phrase from a book by Zadie Smith called On Beauty. And that book is a very kind of human portrait of families and adolescence and sexuality, and has all these really important themes. And I was reading it actually as I was finishing the album. And to me, that phrase, it's bittersweet. It captures the idea of the sun being this healing force. And I wrote a lot of the album about experiences that happened to me in summer in London. And there's that sense also of being overcome by emotion. That sense of ambiguity as to whether it's melancholy or joy and euphoria. I like that, and it's something that I think is at the core of this album, bittersweetness and learning to transform difficult situations into something beautiful. So the meaning of the album cover is that it's actually based off this portrait of Jean-Michel Basquiat sitting in his studio on these two red chairs, and I wanted it to feel candid. I wanted it to feel as if you were just stumbling into my bedroom, into my own private space and all my private stories, and I wanted also to have all my kind of crystals and salt lamps and objects around me just to mirror the fact that this album is actually a collage. It's a patchwork of different vignettes and different conversations and people that have shaped my adolescence. So for me, writing music is a very impulsive and instinctive process. The thing that they all have in common is that I always try and make it an emotional outpouring. I don't labor over things for too long, because I feel like that's when you get in the way of yourself and in the way of your subconscious. And in terms of my process, usually I'll have 10 minutes where I write continuously as a stream of consciousness, and then I'll pick words and phrases that I like or that I think could be significant or transformed into a hook maybe, and I'll make that into a poem, and then I'll make that poem into lyrics. So for me, it's always words first. And then depending on if I'm working with someone else or by myself, maybe I'll try and find a sample, or maybe I'll just play around on the keyboard or on the guitar for a bit and just see what happens. I think for me, making music is a very playful process. I'm somebody who doesn't really enjoy studios. I prefer to record and write in Airbnbs and apartments and bedrooms. Because since I was 15, I've been making music in those spaces. Those places where you can just go and make a cup of tea or make some pasta or go for a walk, see the light. And for me, that inspires me to write, because so much of what I write is about the real world and being in touch with it. So my environment is definitely very important. So I made a lot of this album with Luca Bucciolati. We met when I was 17 years old, and we've been working together pretty much ever since. I do a lot of demoing at home by myself as well, and on this record I also worked with Paul Epworth and Bad Sounds. And most of the album was actually made, in terms of the setup, it was just a bass guitar, an electric guitar, a little MIDI keyboard and a computer, and that's all we really needed. So my love of short stories and poetry, I'm still not really sure where that came from. You know, it's something that I was doing since I was 7 or 8 years old, and neither of my parents were particularly creative or writers, but I just had this strange kind of inner drive just to write things down. And I would always write notes, I would always journal, I would always be upstairs on my dad's computer just making up wild imaginary stories. I think I had a very overactive imagination when I was a kid. And the more I discovered, the more my passion for literature and for writing grew. I think even in terms of music, you know, there weren't that many people around me doing it, but it's something that I always internally loved and wanted to do. When people that I know and really look up to like my music, it's quite surreal. I always have this sense of, is someone kind of playing a joke on me or something? And it just feels so warm, because so many of these people, you know, people like Florence Welch or Billie Eilish, they're all in their own right making such unique and amazing art that maybe I listened to, you know, when I was growing up. And to have the tables turn and them view me as someone making things that's adding value to their lives, you know, being a part of people's lives and people who I really respect, there's no feeling like it, really. Fashion is something that's always really interested me, and the collaborations that I've done with fashion brands over the last year have been some of the highlights, honestly, of my career. I was able to co-direct this short film for Gucci and Days, where we went to Margate and I performed this spoken word piece that was based on this song that I heard by Florist, and it's about kind of healing and the creative process. And to be able to explore different mediums is something I've always loved. You know, to be able to go to Rome and talk to Alessandro about his creative vision and what he wants to do with his work and his art was really inspiring. And to be part of that short film, that collection with people like Harry Styles and Florence Welch was pretty surreal. I'm always so kind of grateful to be there and grateful to be able to travel and explore music and art in different ways. Being an ambassador for Calm is something that really aligns with my mission in terms of what I'm doing with my music. You know, they provide free support for people who are going through mental health crises, people who may have nobody else to turn to. And I've always been a believer that, you know, when you do get a platform or, you know, your reach expands, then it's your duty to use it to share resources and to be a positive force and to try and help people who are less fortunate or maybe struggling more. So to be able to be an ambassador for Calm, especially during lockdown, was really fulfilling, and I hope that I can do a lot more work with them in person. When I released Black Dog, we were mid-lockdown, and people were reaching out to me saying that that song was saving them, that song was giving them something to wake up for in the morning, or it was soothing them through things like panic attacks or through low moments. And you know, the last year was a really difficult one for everybody in different ways, and to be able to make art that lifts people up is all I've ever really wanted to do. I remember opening my journal and seeing an entry that I'd written when I was 13, and it said, you know, I want to help people with my music. And at that point, you know, nobody knew who I was, nobody was listening, and now I'm kind of doing it, so it feels like a lovely full circle moment. I think my biggest musical achievement to date, it's probably writing this album, because, you know, the debut album has been something that I've kind of looked forward to and been nervous about making, honestly, my whole life. It's something that I really put a lot of energy and hope and blood and time into. It's something that feels like a part of me. And whilst I was writing it, I processed a lot of things that, you know, had been troubling me for a while. And I just hope that it's something that people can enjoy and be moved by and share with other people that they love.
Started dreaming of a house with red carnations by the windows, where he didn't feel so small, so overwhelmed by all his flaws. I know you can't let go of anything at the moment, just know it won't